What started as a joyful day at the park turned into a nightmare for 7-year-old Sophia and her family. When a police officer blocked her wheelchair, frustration turned to something far worse. He struck her in front of stunned onlookers, completely unaware that Sophia's father was an FBI agent. What happened next sparked outrage, fueled a quest for justice, and left a powerful message about standing up to those who abuse their power. Stay tuned to find out how this remarkable story ends, and let us know where you are listening from. The warm summer sun shone brightly over Humboldt Park in Chicago, where the annual Lakeside Festival was in full swing. The air was filled with the smell of popcorn, the lively sounds of music, and the excited chatter of families enjoying the day. 7-year-old Sophia Ramirez grinned as she moved her wheelchair along the gravel path, eyes sparkling with excitement as she took in the colorful stalls around her. Her mother, Isabella, kept a watchful eye, proud of her daughter's independence. Sophia was a lively, spirited girl, her wheelchair adorned with stickers of her favorite characters, a reminder that she was every bit as vibrant as any other kid at the festival. "Mom, can we go to the playground?" Sophia called out, pointing excitedly. Isabella smiled, nodding. "Go on ahead, honey. It'll catch up." Sophia pushed forward, her heart brimming with excitement as she navigated the gravel path toward the playground. But her joy was short-lived. Standing at the entrance to the playground was a large man in a police uniform, his presence casting an eerie shadow across the entrance. Officer Mark Geller, known in the neighborhood for his intimidating demeanor, watched her approach, his expression twisted with disdain. As Sophia neared, he stepped directly into her path. Startled, she looked up at him. "Excuse me, sir," Sophia said politely, her voice barely rising above a whisper. "Get out of the way, you little brat," he sneered, blocking her path further. Sophia's heart raced. She tried to maneuver around him, but he moved to stop her again, his look of contempt sending chills through her. Nearby, Isabella's attention was drawn to the commotion. Her eyes widened as she watched the officer confront her daughter. She dropped her coffee and broke into a sprint, fear gripping her heart. But just as she reached them, Officer Geller's hand came down, striking Sophia across the face. The sound echoed through the festival, and a stunned silence fell over the crowd. The slap was like a gunshot. For a moment, the festival's joyous atmosphere was replaced by a heavy, chilling silence. Sophia instinctively raised her hand to her cheek, tears welling in her eyes as she stared at the officer in disbelief. Isabella's shock quickly turned to fury. She stepped between her daughter and Officer Geller, her fists clenched, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "What is wrong with you?" she demanded, locking eyes with the officer. "She's a child. How dare you?" Geller's expression shifted, but instead of remorse, he looked defiant, his lips curling into a sneer. "Stay out of it," he spat, trying to intimidate Isabella. But Isabella was undeterred. "You think you can just hit my daughter and walk away?" she shouted. "I swear you will answer for this." By now, a crowd had gathered, some recording the incident with their phones. Outrage rippled through the bystanders, and murmurs grew louder as people began to shout at the officer. The sense of unity in the crowd emboldened Isabella further, and she held her ground, a mother's protective fury burning in her eyes. The video spread online like wildfire, first locally, then nationally, until news outlets across the country picked up the story. Footage of Officer Mark Geller towering over little Sophia, blocking her path and striking her across the face, was burned into the minds of viewers everywhere. In each clip, the cruel impact was undeniable, as was Isabella's heart-wrenching confrontation, her voice sharp with fury and heartbreak as she defended her daughter. Within hours, social media was ablaze with hashtags like #JusticeForSophia and #StandWithSophia. People shared their outrage, disbelief, and sorrow. Stories from other parents, from disabled individuals, and from victims of police misconduct filled the comments. The public's reaction was swift and furious, their voices uniting in demands for justice, accountability, and change. At home, Isabella sat with Sophia, holding her close as the news played out on television, showing clips of the incident on a loop. Her phone buzzed with messages from friends, neighbors, and complete strangers offering their support. As she watched Sophia's story spark a national conversation, her emotions wavered between anger and determination. She knew their lives had changed forever, but she also saw the glimmer of something else, hope. Sophia's courage, her defiance in the face of cruelty, was now inspiring countless others. 3 days after the incident, Isabella received an email invitation from a coalition of civil rights organizations. They were organizing a rally in support of Sophia at Daley Plaza in downtown Chicago. Hundreds of people were expected to attend, and they wanted her to be the keynote speaker. Isabella felt a rush of anxiety. She wasn't accustomed to public speaking, let alone in front of a crowd. But as she looked down at Sophia, who was resting in her lap, she realized she couldn't stay silent. She needed to speak not just for her daughter, but for every child and every family affected by injustice. On the day of the rally, Isabella and Sophia arrived to find Daley Plaza packed with people. The crowd stretched across the square, hundreds of people holding signs that read "Justice for Sophia, Protect Our Children," and "End Police Brutality." Many wore shirts bearing Sophia's name, while others held up pictures of their own children, standing in solidarity. The energy in the air was electric. Isabella looked out over the crowd, a sea of faces united by one cause, and felt an overwhelming surge of gratitude and pride. Sophia, by her side, seemed awestruck by the support, clutching her mother's hand tightly as they made their way to the stage. Isabella took a steadying breath as she stepped up to the microphone. Her heart was pounding, but when she looked out at the crowd, she saw compassion and empathy reflected back at her. She took another breath, and with Sophia's hand in hers, she began. "My daughter," she started, her voice echoing across the plaza, "is not a threat. She is a child who just wanted to play, a child who wanted to enjoy a sunny day with her friends and family." Her voice grew stronger as she continued, her words steady but laced with the pain of that day. But on that day, someone who was supposed to protect her chose to hurt her instead. The crowd's murmurs fell silent as they listened to her every word. Isabella continued, her voice growing with emotion. "No parent should have to watch their child suffer such cruelty. No child should ever feel fear when they see a uniform. We have to ask ourselves, what kind of world are we creating if we allow this to happen to our children? What message are we sending when those in power choose to harm rather than protect?" She paused, gathering herself as she looked down at Sophia, who gazed up at her with unwavering trust. Taking courage from her daughter's resilience, Isabella looked back at the crowd. "Today, we are here to say enough is enough. We are here to demand accountability not just for my daughter, but for every child who deserves to be treated with dignity and respect." A chant rose from the crowd. "Justice for Sophia! Justice for Sophia!" The voices grew louder, their unified demand for justice filling the plaza, echoing off the surrounding buildings. Isabella felt a surge of hope and strength she hadn't known was possible. Sophia's story had touched hearts, had moved people to action. As the chants continued, a series of speakers took the stage, each one sharing their own stories of injustice and calling for meaningful change. Activists spoke about police accountability and the urgent need for reform, emphasizing the importance of protecting the rights of all people, especially the most vulnerable. Local leaders called for stricter training requirements, transparency in investigations, and community oversight. At one point, a young woman in a wheelchair wheeled herself up to the microphone. She introduced herself as Marisol, a college student and activist who had experienced discrimination due to her disability. She shared her story, describing her own fears of authority figures and her daily struggles with being seen as less than by others. "We are strong. We are capable," Marisol said, her voice breaking with emotion. "But we need allies, parents, teachers, neighbors to stand with us, to amplify our voices. That's what Sophia and Isabella have done for me today. They have given me the courage to speak out." Tears filled Isabella's eyes as she watched Marisol speak, and she squeezed Sophia's hand, feeling the power of unity and compassion in the air. Sophia leaned into her mother, whispering, "She's brave, Mom." Isabella looked down, smiling. "Just like you, sweetheart." The rally continued for hours, with more voices joining the call for change. The crowd didn't waver, their energy only growing as the afternoon wore on. By the time the event came to an end, Daley Plaza had transformed into a symbol of hope and resilience. People left with renewed determination. their faces reflecting the shared purpose they had found in Sophia's story. As Isabella and Sophia walked away from the stage, dozens of people approached, offering words of encouragement, hugs, and promises to spread the word. A mother of 2 young children hugged Isabella, whispering, "You've given us all strength. We're with you." That evening, as Isabella and Sophia returned home, they watched coverage of the rally on the news. Reporters captured the enormous turnout, the impassioned speeches, and the heartwarming images of Sophia in her mother's arms. It wasn't just a local story anymore, it was national news. Their living room was filled with the voices of people they'd never met, but who were now part of their story. Sophia looked up at her mother, her eyes shining. "Did we really make a difference, Mom?" Isabella pulled her close, her heart full. "Yes, Sophia, we made a difference, and we'll keep making one, together." As they watched the footage, Isabella felt a sense of peace. She knew that this journey was far from over, but now they were no longer alone. They had sparked something far greater than either of them could have imagined. And with a community of support standing behind them, Isabella knew they could face whatever came next. The trial of Officer Mark Geller began a month later, with media coverage reaching a fever pitch. Sophia, still bearing the emotional scars of the incident, sat beside her mother in the courtroom, her hand tightly clutching Isabella's. The once defiant officer looked shaken, the confidence he had once worn like armor nowhere to be seen. Prosecutor Rachel Navarro, a fierce advocate for justice, took the lead in presenting the case. She introduced videos taken by witnesses showing Geller's aggression toward Sophia. With each piece of evidence, the picture of what had happened that day became clearer, and the courtroom fell silent, gripped by the gravity of the officer's actions. Witness after witness took the stand, describing the horror of watching an officer assault a defenseless child. When Isabella testified, she spoke of the anger and helplessness she felt as she watched her daughter suffer at the hands of someone entrusted to protect her. The final day of deliberations arrived with an air of suspense that weighed heavily on everyone in the courtroom. People from all walks of life had gathered, filling every seat and standing shoulder to shoulder along the walls. The soft hum of nervous conversations faded as the judge entered and the jury filed into the room, their expressions solemn. Isabella held Sophia's hand tightly, sensing the little girl's anxiety, her own heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Officer Mark Geller, guilty on all charges." The words hung in the air, and for a brief, powerful moment, no one moved. A collective breath, one that the room seemed to have been holding for days, was finally released. Isabella let out a small gasp as tears welled in her eyes, a wave of relief and gratitude sweeping over her. She closed her eyes, her emotions overtaking her as she gripped Sophia's hand even tighter. When she opened her eyes, she looked down to see Sophia gazing up at her with a brave, tentative smile, her own eyes shimmering with tears. Isabella knelt down, meeting her daughter's eyes, and gave her a reassuring hug, murmuring softly, "You did it, Sophia. We did it." Outside the courtroom, the sound of cheers began to swell, reaching a crescendo as word of the verdict spread. Supporters who had gathered in the plaza erupted into applause, their voices filling the air with a joy and unity that could be felt throughout the courthouse. Reporters were already broadcasting the news, their microphones catching the jubilant chants of justice for Sophia, and no one is above the law. As Isabella and Sophia stepped out onto the courthouse steps, they were met with a surge of people holding signs, waving banners, and chanting for justice. Sophia looked around, awestruck by the hundreds of faces looking back at her with admiration and support. For the first time, she saw herself not just as a victim of a terrible incident, but as someone who had become a symbol of resilience and courage. A reporter approached Isabella with a microphone. "Miss Ramirez, how does it feel to hear the verdict after such a long and difficult fight?" Isabella took a breath, her voice choked with emotion but steady. "It feels like justice. It feels like a promise to every family and every child that their voices matter. We are here because we stood together, and because my daughter Sophia showed a courage I didn't know was possible. This verdict isn't just for you, it's for everyone who's been hurt, dismissed, or overlooked." Sophia glanced up at her mother, then took a small step forward, her voice soft but firm. "Thank you," she said, speaking to the crowd, her voice amplified by a nearby microphone. "Thank you for helping us." She looked down shyly, her words simple but powerful, resonating with everyone who heard them. The crowd cheered louder, and a few people began chanting, "Sophia! Sophia! Sophia!" The chant spread, a rolling wave of gratitude and respect, and Sophia's eyes widened, her cheeks flushed with both pride and surprise. Isabella wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, holding her close as they stood together, a united front amidst the celebration. As they descended the courthouse steps, Sophia caught sight of Marisol, the college student in a wheelchair who had spoken at the rally, waiting with her own circle of supporters. Marisol wheeled over, her face breaking into a smile as she reached out to Sophia. "You did it, Sophia," she said, her voice brimming with pride. "You showed everyone that we are stronger than they think." Sophia's smile grew, and she reached out to shake Marisol's hand, a sense of camaraderie and shared resilience passing between them. Marisol's presence reminded Sophia that this journey had been about so much more than herself. She felt a new resolve forming within her, a quiet but determined promise to stand up for others just as they had stood up for her. That evening, Isabella and Sophia returned home to find their living room filled with bouquets of flowers, handwritten notes, and letters of support from people they had never met. Sophia picked up a card with a drawing of a rainbow and read aloud, "Dear Sophia, you're my hero. Love, Emma, age 6. Isabella watched as Sophia read through each note, her daughter's small smile growing with every message of kindness and encouragement. Later that night, after the excitement had calmed, Isabella tucked Sophia into bed, sitting beside her for a few quiet moments. Sophia looked up, her eyes thoughtful. "Mom," she whispered, "do you think things will really change now?" Isabella brushed a strand of hair from Sophia's face, her heart swelling with pride. "I think you've already changed things, Sophia. What you went through, what you did, it mattered. You helped people see the truth. And that's how change starts, with people being brave enough to speak out." Sophia's eyes drifted closed, and Isabella stayed a moment longer, watching her daughter finally drift into a peaceful sleep, her face relaxed and calm. The next morning, Isabella woke to find Sophia already awake and seated at the kitchen table, carefully writing in her journal. When Isabella asked what she was working on, Sophia looked up with a determined smile. "I'm writing down my story, Mom," she said, "so people will know." Isabella felt a surge of pride as she watched her daughter, already using her experiences to create something positive. The verdict had been just one part of their journey, a critical turning point, but the impact of Sophia's story, the impact of her bravery would continue to grow, rippling outward and inspiring others. As Isabella poured herself a cup of coffee, her phone buzzed with new messages. She saw emails from advocacy groups, invitations to speak at events, and requests to collaborate on reform efforts. The fight wasn't over, but they had won an important victory, one that would pave the way for meaningful change. For the first time in months, Isabella felt an overwhelming sense of peace. They had faced injustice head-on and emerged with hope intact. Sophia's story, her courage, had ignited a movement, and with the strength of their community behind them, Isabella knew they could continue this journey, making sure that every child felt safe, respected, and seen. Together, Isabella and Sophia stepped out onto their front porch, hand in hand, facing a world that was still far from perfect but filled with the possibility of a brighter, fairer future. And as they looked out onto their neighborhood, where neighbors waved and friends called out greetings, they knew they had made a difference not just for themselves, but for countless others who could now look to them for hope and inspiration. With the verdict behind them, Isabella and Sophia tried to return to normal life, yet the incident had left deep marks on both of them. Isabella channeled her emotions into advocacy, joining local groups pushing for police reforms. The city of Chicago announced changes to their police policies, including the addition of sensitivity training and oversight committees. One day, Isabella and Sophia returned to Humboldt Park. There, near the playground, they found a small plaque dedicated to Sophia. It read, "In honor of courage and resilience." Sophia traced her fingers over the words, a quiet smile on her face. "Do you like it?" Isabella asked, kneeling beside her daughter. Sophia nodded. "It makes me feel like what happened mattered, that people care." Isabella hugged her, tears welling in her eyes. They do, sweetheart. And you help make a difference. As the months passed, Sophia grew more confident, determined to make her voice heard. She began to share her story with classmates, inspiring them to stand up for themselves and others. Isabella continued her work in advocacy, speaking at town halls, schools, and community meetings. Their story had become a symbol of change, a beacon for others who had faced similar injustices. One day, as they sat together on their porch, Sophia looked up at her mother. "Do you think things will really change?" Isabella took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Change is slow, but I believe we've already made a difference. And as long as we keep fighting, things will get better." They stayed there, hand in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Together, they had faced the darkness, and though there was still much to overcome, they knew they had the strength to face whatever lay ahead. After a long fight, Sophia's family found justice, and their story ignited real change. But what about you? If you were in their shoes, would you have fought as hard? How do you feel about the role of those who are supposed to protect us? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because stories like this remind us all of the power we have to stand up and make a difference. Don't forget to subscribe for more such narratives.